Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1982 and we're going to be taking another look at Tina Turner, and this is the video that I promised last week of getting into Tina's background, her career, and the video that we're going to be looking at is an interesting one because it is in that period between leaving Ike behind but then not having her solo career take off yet. So this is going to be River Deep Mountain High in terms of the song we're going to be listening to, but I will be getting into the background as well as some of the performance elements, but those can be found in the other two videos that I've done. The first one was everything about Tina's voice and her performance. The second one was more a compositional breakdown in terms of the song that she was singing. So this is going to have a bit of Tina's background in there as well. Let's get Tina up on screen and see how she gets on.
Okay, I've got an old recording of mine that's called Rivers Deep, Mountains High. When I was a little girl, I had a rag doll, the only doll I've ever owned. Now I love you just the way I love that rag doll. Only now my love has grown. It gets strong every way, and it gets deeper. Let me say, it gets higher day by day. Do I love you, my oh my? Oh, rivers deep, mountain high, yeah. If I lost you, would I cry? Oh, how I love you, baby, baby, baby. When you were a young boy, did you have a puppet? Always followed you around. I'm gonna be as faithful as a puppet. Oh, I'll never let you down. It goes on like a river flows, and it gets sweeter, baby, and heaven knows, oh, it gets sweeter, baby, as it grows, do I love you, my oh my? I say rivers deep, mountains high, oh yeah. And if I lost you, would I cry? Oh, how I love you, baby, 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 I love you, baby, like a flower of the spring. I love you.
I'm just going to jump in here. During this breakdown, again, something that you'll find with all these live performances, having a little section in there to take the dynamics down. But we also had that in the first verse. And the thing about Tina Turner and her live performances is that they were so full of energy and always have that choreography element to them, as well as a solid vocal the whole time. Exactly the same case here. And I think also a lot of people just assumed that Tina was younger than she was because of hitting the stage in the mid-60s and getting a break with Ike and being seen as Ike and Tina Turner at that time, not really knowing that in the video that I featured before, which was 1974, Tina would have been around 34, in her mid-30s at that point. In 1982, she would have been about 43, and the energy in her stage shows never left, and she probably put a lot of women in their early 20s to shame with her fitness levels. But also here, you can see how hot it is on stage, and it must be really uncomfortable, but Tina Turner was that absolute professional. And also, have you ever seen a Tina Turner performance where she looks a bit lazy, or she's not putting in the effort, or the vocals not very good? With Tina, you always got 100% in that live show, in every single element, with the choreography and the vocals. Also, the longevity of Tina's career, being able to maintain a level of performance throughout that career, because it's something that a lot of artists struggle with as they get older, especially vocalists, being able to produce that same quality of vocal night after night as they age, especially getting into the 40s and 50s and 60s. I mentioned about Tina's last tour being when she was 68, and still not missing a beat vocally and still doing the choreography. She's always kept that same level of performance. Relating this to the current music industry as well, with Tina's age and having such an impact on the industry in the early to mid 80s, back in the day, if you were good enough, you were young enough in terms of signing a record deal and getting your face out there, performing in front of people. You were judged on quality, whereas a lot of shows on TV nowadays, and a band who I know very well called Essex County, who are over in the USA now, three brothers that are just amazing vocally. They were on the same show that I was on, doing the X Factor in the UK. I was doing it to make a point about everything that I've mentioned in live streams. All of you guys probably know the background to it, but these three guys are so talented, and the feedback that they got from Sharon Osbourne was that they weren't relevant in today's music industry. So that is saying that talent is not relevant in the music industry nowadays. This video isn't going to turn into another music industry rant, but that situation and that feedback that they got, for me, sums up the music industry perfectly, because it's not about how talented you are, it's about how relevant you are to the music industry, how much money they can make with you, given image, and how they want to manipulate your sound and your look in order to make the most money. And these guys could all play instruments, and they wrote songs and still write songs, and are great at singing individually, harmonizing with each other. So they've got too much talent for a record label that want to take on somebody who doesn't know how the business works, because that'll be more profitable for the record label. Just a quick word about this song as well, because co-written by and produced by Phil Spector. And if you want to find out more about Phil, I mentioned him in my Righteous Brothers video that I did on You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling, so you can head over there. But he saw Ike and Tina Turner live. He offered them a place or to be featured on the Big TNT show, and from that is when he had this song that he really wanted Tina Turner's voice on. So they worked out terms, and Ike organised a $20,000 payment from Phil in order to have creative control over the production and the song, which he did pay. And originally there were 21 session musicians on that recording, and once you know about Phil's recording techniques, it'll all make sense. But it also cost, I think, $23,000 in order to put the song together, and Tina said herself that it felt like she had sung the song 500,000 times because Phil was such a perfectionist. He wanted that perfect take, and he did get it, but eventually it would get to number 3 here in the UK. It was a monster hit. By the way, when I mentioned that it was $21,000 to get everybody in, or the session guys get them paid, that is the modern equivalent of $170,000 to $180,000, and that was unheard of at the time, spending so much money on a recording. But it just goes to show how much Phil really believed in this song. He was right to believe in that song, because it was voted at number 33 in Rolling Stone's 500 greatest songs of all time. But we're going to get back into this video just to finish off the performance of this song. Obviously, the link's going to be in the the description below, as always, so you guys can watch this whole show if you want to. I think it's just an excerpt of the show because it's only half an hour in length, but you can do that by following the link in the description. So we're going to resume the video now, and we'll get more into Tina's history after the end of this performance.
Like a robin loved to sing, and I love you, baby, like a schoolboy loves his fire. And I love you, honey, rivers deep, mountain high. Baby, if I lost you, would I cry? Oh, how I love you, baby, baby, baby. All right.
And there we have it. Tina's one of those people that when you're watching them, it looks like they've got endless energy and they just have to move, because if they don't, they'll explode or something. And that's what you get from Tina Turner. Just all of her mannerisms that were so unique when she sang, but also did the choreography, just the way that she moved, but also vocally, the way that Tina in this performance puts that cry into her voice, something that I've mentioned on this channel quite a lot with top singers. They can just add that cry to the beginning of vocal phrases, which means that it's the optimum amount of air being used with the vocal cords to not dry them out, but also gives that emotion. And that's something that Tina has in her voice. All of that soul and blues that's in there, but that natural rasp as well, which I do mention in the other videos that I've done on Tina. It's really interesting how it all started with Tina, because she would go to watch Ike's band. They were called Kings of Rhythm, and during a break in the set, the drummer said to Tina, "Give us a song," and gave her the microphone. So she sang a song. Everyone was suitably impressed. She sang a few more songs on that night and then became a regular with Kings of Rhythm. She then wrote a song called "A Fool in Love," and this was for Art Lassiter. So they booked the studio in order for it to be recorded, but Art didn't turn up. So Tina supplied the lead vocal that she wasn't intending on singing, but the studio had been paid for. So that's what she did. So this song and the recording of it was only really intended as a demo, and it had Tina's vocals on there. A guy called Juggy Murray heard this recording and offered $25,000 for the publishing rights and to own the recording, which they accepted, and it was released, and it got to number 27 in the charts. It was a huge hit, and this was in 1960. This is when the band name changed to the Ike and Tina Turner Revue, and they were very popular throughout the 60s. 1966 is when this song was released, as I mentioned earlier, but also towards the end of the 60s, Tina was appearing on different TV shows just herself without the band, so there was always this draw towards Tina Turner being the focus of attention, especially with live shows, considering her energy and her vocal ability. In 1969 is when they released Outer Season, and they released The Hunter that same year. They had a massively successful show in Las Vegas where all the stars would turn out to see them: Elvis, Janis Joplin, Cher, James Brown, the Rolling Stones. They were getting so much publicity, and Tina was getting so much attention for her stage performance and her vocal ability, as I mentioned before. In the early 70s is when the sound started to get a little bit more of a rock edge, and that was certainly signified with the cover of Proud Mary, which I looked at in the other video on Tina. In 1975, Tina starred in the rock musical movie called Tommy, and by this time you could start to see the direction that things were going in, because she had a couple of solo albums. One of those was called Tina Turns the Country On, and the other one was called The Acid Queen, which was her character from the movie movie that I just mentioned. So towards the mid to late 70s, in 1976 is when she did Split with Ike, and then in 1978 was when the divorce was finalized. So towards the end of the decade, she kept on touring and performing, did shows in Las Vegas, but she also recorded 2 albums around this time, but unfortunately they didn't chart. This is the time that Roger Davies then took over as Tina's manager, and they released Ball of Confusion, which was a massive European hit, and he got Tina touring with the likes of Rod Stewart, Chuck Berry, the Rolling Stones, so she was still getting out there. He also got one of her videos on MTV, which was a massive part of the 80s, getting that video element to go with the music and also to get those songs on TV. So now in 1983 is when Tina secured a deal with Capitol Records, and the single that she released that went huge was Let's Stay Together, because that got to number 5 in the UK and number 26 in the USA. And the album that just was the making of Tina at this time was Private Dancer, because released in 1984, that was huge. It went 5 times platinum, got to number 3 in the charts, and sold over 10 million copies worldwide. She released a massive single from that album called What's Love Got to Do With It, and that was a huge hit everywhere. Got to number 1 in the USA. In 1985, she also won 3 Grammys, and she was in the movie Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and there were a couple of tracks that she performed for that movie, and they were We Don't Need Another Hero, and the second track was One of the Living, and this is the track that she won a Grammy. In 1986, she released her book, her autobiography called I, Tina, and that was a bestseller. She had her Hollywood Walk of Fame star in that same year. In 1986 is when she released Break Every Rule, and that sold over 1 million copies just in the USA. And this is when she went on tour, and she was breaking records all over the place, but the one that I mentioned on the other video of her show in Brazil, where she performed to over 180,000 people at one particular show, that was in Rio de Janeiro, I believe, and that was a new Guinness World Record for a female artist in terms of being watched by that many people. In 1991 is when she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as part of Ike and Tina Turner, and Ike was incarcerated at that time. Tina didn't make it to the ceremony, the induction ceremony for that particular event. In 1995, she recorded the theme for the Bond film GoldenEye, and in the year 2000, at the age of 60, she had one of the biggest selling tours of all time, and I do mention this in my other video, but that grossed over $100 million, and she would then get back out on the road on the world tour in 2008 for the 50th anniversary tour, and that was even bigger. That was one of, or is one of the biggest selling tours of all time. In 2010, she re-released The Best, and that charted in the top 40 here in the UK, which made Tina Turner the only female artist to ever chart consecutively over 6 decades in the top 40 of the UK charts. And that is one of those records that is immense, and you just can never see that ever being beaten. In 2018, her musical called Tina hit the stage here in London's West End, and that's massively popular. It was, and it still is now. You can still get tickets for that in London, and she was also awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Grammys in 2018. But it's great to have a look back, especially at this part of her career where she had made that break and was going in her own direction as a solo artist, but hadn't yet had that massive album that Private Dancer turned into. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!